Most of you are addicted to intensity because it lets you lie to yourself. One explosive day, one aggressive push, one fake "I'm back" moment, and then nothing. You disappear again. You collapse. You drift. And you call that effort? That's not effort. That's emotional instability dressed up as ambition. Real power doesn't scream once and vanish. It shows up every single day, cold, controlled, and inevitable. You've been sold a weak fantasy that success comes from moments of fire. It doesn't. It comes from repetition so boring it breaks weak men. The gym doesn't care about your hype. Money doesn't respond to motivation. Discipline isn't built on intensity. It's built on obedience. Daily, relentless obedience to a standard you refuse to negotiate with. That's where you're failing. You want to feel powerful instead of becoming powerful. And here's the truth. Most of you are too soft to accept. You don't have a motivation problem. You have an identity problem. You're still the same undisciplined person pretending to act like someone elite for a few hours. That's why you keep collapsing, because you're playing a role instead of becoming the man. This is where speaking in tongues comes in. Not the weak emotional nonsense people misunderstand, but the real version, the language of transformation. It's the internal code you rewrite inside your own mind. Every day you show up, you're speaking a new language to yourself through action, through repetition, through control. You're telling your brain, this is who I am now. Not once, not when you feel like it. Every single day. Weak men speak in excuses. Strong men speak in execution. Your actions are your language. And right now, your language is inconsistent, emotional, and fragile. That's why your results reflect chaos. You're literally programming failure into your identity through your behavior. Every skipped day, every broken promise, every delay, that's you speaking weakness fluently. But when you lock into daily effort, something shifts. You stop negotiating. You stop questioning. You stop needing motivation. You become automatic. That's power. That's control. You don't wake up and decide whether you'll act. You act because that's who you are. That's when the identity shift happens. That's when you stop being a man chasing success and become a man success is built on. Daily effort is quiet. It's repetitive. It's brutal. And that's exactly why most people avoid it. Because it strips away the illusion. There's no dopamine hit, no applause, no dramatic comeback story. Just work again and again and again until you either break or transform. And let me be clear. Occasional intensity is for amateurs. It's for men who need emotion to function. Elite men don't rely on emotion. They rely on systems. They rely on discipline so sharp it cuts through any feeling. You don't rise because you feel strong. You rise because you trained yourself to move regardless. You've been trained to chase intensity because it feels powerful in the moment. That surge of energy, that sudden burst of effort, that temporary obsession with getting your life together, it gives you the illusion that you're transforming. But you're not transforming. You're reacting, and reactions are unstable. They fade as quickly as they appear. The truth is uncomfortable. Intensity is easy. It requires no structure, no discipline, no long-term control. It's just emotion. And emotion is unreliable. Look at your own pattern. You go all in for a day, maybe a week if you're lucky. You push hard, you feel unstoppable, you convince yourself this time is different. Then what happens? You disappear. You slow down, you negotiate with yourself. You start making excuses that sound logical but are actually weak. That cycle repeats because you've built your entire approach on temporary energy instead of permanent standards. Daily execution doesn't feel powerful at first. It feels repetitive. It feels ordinary. It forces you to face yourself without the mask of excitement. That's why most people avoid it. Because once the emotion is gone, all that's left is discipline, and discipline exposes who you really are. There's no hiding inside routine. Either you show up or you don't. Either you follow through or you collapse. There's no middle ground. What separates men who build real power from those who stay stuck is simple. One group relies on how they feel. The other relies on what they've decided. Decision is stable. Feeling is not. When you base your actions on emotion, you're giving control away. You're saying, I'll work when I feel like it. That's weakness. Because there will always be days when you don't feel like it. Those are the days that actually matter. Anyone can perform when they're motivated. That requires no strength. The man who executes daily understands something most people ignore. Repetition builds identity. Every time you follow through, even when it's boring, even when it's uncomfortable, you're reinforcing a version of yourself that doesn't break. You're telling your mind, this is who I am now. And over time, that message becomes automatic. You no longer need hype. You no longer need external triggers. You move because that's your standard. There's also a brutal reality about intensity that people don't want to admit it. It creates inconsistency. And inconsistency destroys results. You cannot build anything meaningful on a foundation that keeps resetting. Every time you stop, you lose momentum. Every time you restart, you waste time rebuilding what you already had. That's why you feel stuck. Not because you're incapable, but because you refuse to stay consistent long enough to compound your effort. Daily execution compounds. That's where the real advantage comes from. Small actions repeated without interruption become something massive over time. It's not exciting to think about. It doesn't make for a dramatic story, but it works. And results don't care about what's exciting. They respond to what's consistent. The men who dominate aren't the ones who go the hardest for a short period. They're the ones who never stop. They remove the option to quit. They remove the need for motivation. They operate on systems, not emotions. And once you understand that, everything changes. Because now it's no longer about how intense you can be, it's about how controlled you can remain. If you're honest with yourself, you already know where you stand. You know whether you're chasing temporary highs or building something real. And until you shift from emotional bursts to disciplined repetition, you will keep experiencing the same cycle of progress and collapse. Not because the goal is too hard, but because your approach is fundamentally weak. You keep telling yourself you need more motivation, but that's a convenient lie. Motivation is unstable, inconsistent, and completely unreliable under pressure. What you actually lack is a defined identity, and until that changes, nothing else will. You can force yourself to act differently for a short period, but if your identity stays the same, you will always return to your baseline. That's why you keep repeating the same cycle, short bursts of effort, followed by inevitable collapse. Pay attention to how you think and speak. You say things like, "I'm trying to be disciplined," or "I want to be consistent." That language alone exposes the problem. You're positioning discipline and consistency as something outside of you, something you visit occasionally, instead of something you are. And as long as you see it that way, your actions will always be temporary, because you don't protect something that isn't part of your identity. You abandon it the moment it becomes uncomfortable. High-level performance is not built on trying. It's built on certainty. The men who operate at the top don't wake up and debate whether they'll execute. There is no internal negotiation. There is no emotional discussion. The decision has already been made at the identity level. They don't think, "Should I do this today?" They think, "This is what I do." That difference is everything. One is optional, the other is non-negotiable. Right now, your identity is built on inconsistency. That's the uncomfortable truth. You've proven to yourself repeatedly that you are someone who starts and stops, someone who gets excited then fades, someone who gets excited then begs that commitment. And every time you repeat that pattern, you reinforce it. You're not just failing in the moment, you're training your brain to expect failure. You're building a self-image that aligns with quitting. You don't fix that by chasing motivation. You fix it by rewriting the identity through action. Not once, not when it feels convenient. Every single day. You act in alignment with the person you want to become, even when it feels unnatural, especially when it feels unnatural, because that discomfort is the signal that you're breaking the old pattern. This is where most people collapse. They expect the identity to change first, and then the actions to follow. That's backwards. Identity is earned through repetition. You don't become disciplined and then start acting disciplined. You act disciplined repeatedly until it becomes who you are. It's a process of proof. You're showing yourself over and over again that you are capable of consistency, and eventually, your mind accepts it as fact. But this requires brutal honesty. You cannot keep lying to yourself about who you are. You cannot keep labeling yourself as potential while your actions show the opposite. Potential means nothing without execution. In fact, it's dangerous. It gives you a false sense of capability while you continue to underperform. You need to look at your daily behavior and judge yourself based on that alone. Not your intentions, not your plans, your actions. Once you start aligning your actions with a higher standard, something shifts. You begin to trust yourself. And that trust is powerful, because when you trust yourself, you stop hesitating. You stop doubting. You stop overthinking. You move with certainty because you built a track record that supports it. That's what real confidence is, not words, not belief, but evidence. And understand this clearly. Identity is either working for you or against you. Right now, it's working against you. It's pulling you back into old habits, old patterns, old results. And unless you deliberately take control of it, nothing will change. You will continue to operate at the same level, no matter how many times you try to push harder for a few days. You don't need more motivation. You need a new standard for who you are. And that standard must be enforced daily, without exception. Because once your identity changes, your actions stop being a struggle, they become automatic. Every action you take is a message, and your brain is always listening. It doesn't care about what you intend to do, what you plan to do, or what you say you'll become. It only records what you repeatedly execute. That's the signal. That's the data. And right now, whether you like it or not, you are programming yourself every single day. The only question is, are you building strength or are you reinforcing weakness? You might think skipping one workout, delaying one task, or breaking one promise is insignificant. It's not. Because your brain doesn't evaluate isolated moments. It recognizes patterns. And patterns are built through repetition. One weak action isn't the problem. The problem is what that action represents. It's a vote, a signal that says this is acceptable. And once something becomes acceptable, it becomes repeatable. That's how standards collapse. Quietly, gradually, without you even noticing. Look at your current results. They're not random. They're the direct outcome of the signals you've been sending. If your life feels inconsistent, it's because your actions are inconsistent. If your progress feels slow, it's because your execution is unstable. There is no mystery here. Your behavior is writing your future in real time. Every choice, every delay, every excuse, it's all being recorded and reinforced. What most people fail to understand is that the brain prioritizes familiarity over ambition. It doesn't care about your goals. It cares about what you've trained it to expect. If you consistently show up and execute, it starts to recognize that as your normal state. But if you repeatedly hesitate, procrastinate, or quit, that becomes your baseline. And once something becomes your baseline, it becomes incredibly difficult to break. This is why willpower alone doesn't work. You can't fight a deeply ingrained pattern with occasional bursts of effort. It's like trying to override years of programming with a few moments of discipline. It doesn't hold. The system always wins. And your current system is built on inconsistency. To change that, you need to become obsessive about the signals you send. Every action must align with the identity you're trying to build. Not sometimes, not when it's convenient, every time. Because consistency is what rewires the system. When you repeatedly execute the same standard, your brain begins to accept it as reality. It stops resisting. It stops questioning. It starts cooperating. There's a shift that happens when you do this correctly. At first, everything feels forced. You have to push yourself. You have to stay conscious of your decisions. But over time, the resistance fades. The behavior becomes automatic. You no longer need to think about it. You don't need reminders. You don't need motivation. You act because that's what your brain has been trained to do. But this only works if you are ruthless with your standards. You cannot afford to send mixed signals. You cannot perform at a high level one day and then drop the standard the next. That inconsistency confuses the system. It weakens the pattern. It delays the transformation. You either commit fully or you stay stuck. And here's the reality most people avoid. Your brain is always adapting, whether you're aware of it or not. If you're not deliberately programming strength, you are automatically reinforcing weakness. There is no neutral state. You are either improving or deteriorating every single day. So when you choose to execute, even when it's difficult, even when it's uncomfortable, you are doing more than completing a task. You are sending a clear, undeniable signal. This is who I am. And when that signal is repeated enough times, it becomes permanent. You keep treating discipline like a mood, and that's exactly why you keep failing. You wait to feel ready, you wait to feel focused, you wait to feel motivated, and when those feelings don't show up, neither do you. That's not discipline, that's dependency. You've made your performance dependent on something unstable, and now you're surprised that your results are unstable too. Discipline is not emotional, it's structural. It's a system you follow regardless of how you feel. It's a decision that has already been made, so there's no room left for negotiation. The moment you start asking yourself whether you should act, you've already lost control. Because now you're debating with the weakest version of yourself, the one that wants comfort, ease, and delay. And that version will always find a convincing argument if you let it speak. Most people misunderstand what discipline actually requires. They think it's about pushing hard when things get difficult. It's not. It's about removing the option to not act It's about designing your behavior in a way where execution becomes automatic. No discussion, no hesitation, just movement. That's what makes it powerful. It eliminates friction. It eliminates doubt. It eliminates the constant internal conflict that drains your energy. Right now, your problem isn't that you can't work hard. You've proven that you can. Your problem is that you don't have a system that forces consistency. You rely on willpower, and willpower fades. You rely on motivation, and motivation fluctuates. You rely on how you feel, and feelings are unpredictable. So you end up in a cycle where you perform well for a short period, then collapse the moment your emotions shift. A disciplined system doesn't care about your emotions. It runs independently of them. You wake up, you execute, you move forward whether you feel strong or not. That's what separates high-level performers from everyone else. They don't waste time thinking about whether they're in the mood. The decision has already been made in advance. Their environment, their schedule, their habits, they all support one outcome: execution. This is where most people resist because it feels restrictive. It feels rigid. It feels like you're losing freedom. But the truth is the opposite. What you call freedom right now is actually chaos. You do what you feel like doing when you feel like doing it, and that lack of structure is exactly what's keeping you stuck. Real freedom comes from control, and control comes from systems. When you build a system, you remove randomness. You remove inconsistency. You remove the need to constantly restart. You stop wasting energy on decisions that should already be settled. And that energy can now be redirected into actual progress. That's efficiency. That's precision. That's how serious people operate. But here's the part you won't like. You have to enforce the system. It doesn't enforce itself. You have to hold the line, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when your mind starts looking for shortcuts. Because the moment you allow exceptions without a valid reason, the system weakens. And once it weakens, it starts to collapse. You don't need a perfect system. You need a strict one. Something simple, clear, and non-negotiable. Something you follow every single day without overthinking. Because overthinking leads to hesitation, and hesitation leads to inaction. And inaction keeps you exactly where you are. Discipline is not about intensity, it's about reliability. It's about becoming someone who can be counted on by yourself first. Because if you can't rely on your own actions, nothing else matters. Your plans mean nothing, your goals mean nothing, your words mean nothing. So stop treating discipline like a feeling you need to chase. It's a standard you enforce. And until you start treating it that way, you will continue to operate below your potential, no matter how many times you try to push harder. You think dominance comes from talent, intelligence, or some rare advantage that only a few people are born with. That belief is convenient because it gives you an excuse to stay where you are. But it's wrong. Dominance is built on consistency, not the kind that looks impressive for a few days, but the kind that becomes so reliable it's almost mechanical. The kind that doesn't break under pressure, distraction, or boredom. Right now, your biggest weakness isn't a lack of ability. It's unpredictability. You show up when it suits you, you disappear when it doesn't, and then you wonder why nothing is compounding in your favor. You cannot dominate anything with that pattern, because dominance requires control, and control requires consistency. Without it, you're just reacting to circumstances instead of shaping them. Look at any area where someone is operating at a high level. It's not chaos, it's precision, it's structure, it's repetition executed so consistently that the outcome becomes predictable. That's what you're missing. You're chasing results without respecting the process that produces them. You want progress, but you refuse to stabilize your behavior long enough for progress to actually happen. Consistency removes randomness. It eliminates the gaps where excuses grow. It forces you into a rhythm where action becomes default. And once you reach that point, something shifts. You stop relying on effort alone, and you start benefiting from momentum. Momentum is powerful because it reduces resistance. When you're already moving, it's easier to keep moving. But when you stop, even briefly, you increase the effort required to start again. This is why inconsistency is so destructive. It resets momentum, it breaks flow, it turns simple actions into difficult ones because you've allowed friction to rebuild. You felt this before. The first day back after a break feels heavy, uncomfortable, forced. That's not because the task is hard. It's because you lost continuity. You allowed the system to shut down. The men who operate at a high level understand this, so they protect their consistency aggressively. They don't treat it casually. They don't assume they'll get back on track later. They maintain the standard every day because they know how quickly things can slip. They don't give themselves unnecessary breaks from discipline because they know those breaks come with a cost. Consistency also builds credibility with yourself first. Every time you follow through, you strengthen trust in your own word, and that trust is critical because once it's established, you stop questioning your ability to execute. You don't hesitate. You don't doubt. You move with certainty because your past actions have proven that you can. Without that trust, everything feels unstable. You set goals, but you don't fully believe you'll achieve them. You make plans, but you second guess your ability to follow through. That hesitation slows you down, it weakens your decisions, and over time it becomes a pattern of underperformance. Consistency eliminates that. It replaces doubt with evidence. It turns effort into identity. You're no longer someone who tries. You're someone who does. And that shift changes how you approach everything. You stop looking for shortcuts. You stop waiting for the right moment. You create results through repetition. There's also a level of mental toughness that comes from consistent action. Not the kind that's loud or dramatic, but the kind that's quiet and unshakable. You become less affected by external noise, less distracted by setbacks, less influenced by how you feel in the moment, because your focus is no longer on emotion. It's on execution. And that's what dominance actually looks like. It's not emotional intensity. It's controlled, repeated action over time. It's showing up when it's easy, and especially when it's not. It's removing the variability from your behavior until your performance becomes stable. If you're inconsistent, you're not in control. And if you're not in control, you're not dominating anything. You're just participating. You keep pointing to isolated moments to justify who you think you are. One productive day, one disciplined week, one short burst where everything feels aligned, and you hold on to that like it defines you. It doesn't. Anyone can perform once. Anyone can act disciplined under the right conditions. That requires no real standard. What defines you is what you do repeatedly, especially when the conditions are not in your favor. Your daily habits are exposing you, not your intentions, not your plans, not your potential, your habits. They are the clearest reflection of your priorities and your level of control. If your actions are inconsistent, delayed, or easily broken, then that's your reality. You can label yourself however you want, but your behavior tells the truth, and the truth doesn't adjust itself to match your self-image. There's a reason you feel stuck, and it's not complicated. You're trying to build a strong identity on weak patterns. You want confidence without consistency. You want results without repetition. You want to be seen as disciplined without actually living in discipline every day. That gap between what you want to be and what you actually do is where frustration comes from. Habits don't just influence your life, they construct it. Every small action you repeat becomes part of a system that either moves you forward or keeps you locked in place. You don't notice it immediately because the changes are subtle at first. But over time, those small actions accumulate, they compound, and eventually they create outcomes that feel massive, even though they were built on simple, repeated behavior. If your habits are weak, your results will reflect that with precision. You won't accidentally become successful while operating on inconsistency. You won't drift into discipline. The system you run daily determines everything. And right now, if your system includes skipping, delaying, or lowering your standard, then your future is already predictable. Most people try to fix this by aiming for bigger actions. They think they need to do more, push harder, or suddenly become extremely productive. That approach fails because it ignores the real issue. The issue isn't intensity, it's reliability. It's your ability to repeat a standard without breaking it. Without that, any progress you make will be temporary. You need to lower the focus from dramatic effort to controlled repetition. What can you do every single day without fail? That's where you start. Because once something becomes daily, it becomes part of your identity. It stops feeling like effort and starts feeling normal. And when something is normal, it no longer requires motivation. There's also a level of honesty required here that most people avoid. You have to stop judging yourself based on your best days and start judging yourself based on your average days. Because your average is what you live in. Your average is what shapes your results. If your average is low, your life will reflect that no matter how strong you are occasionally. This is where discipline becomes real. Not in moments of high performance, but in moments of routine. When nothing feels special, when nothing feels urgent, when there's no external pressure. Do you still execute? That's the standard. That's the measure. Because that's what you will repeat over time. And once you lock into that, something changes. You stop relying on isolated efforts to feel good about yourself. You start building a stable, predictable pattern that you can trust. You don't need to prove anything in one day, because your daily actions are already proving everything over time. Your life is not built on what you occasionally achieve. It's built on what you consistently repeat. And if what you repeat is weak, inconsistent, and easily broken, then everything built on top of it will carry those same qualities. So stop chasing intensity like a drug. It's making you weak. Build something real, something stable, something unshakable. Show up when you don't feel like it. Especially then. That's where identity is forged. That's where dominance is built. At the end of the day, you are exactly what you repeatedly do, not what you occasionally prove. And if your daily actions are weak, inconsistent, and soft, then that's exactly what you are. Fix that. Or stay average. Those are your only two options.